Hey, Pastor Ray Barnett here with you. Glad that you could be with me here on the Oasis. And as always, I wish you a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what time you're watching this broadcast. Beautiful fall day here in upstate New York. A bit overcast, but still, leaves are starting to turn. Here in this spot here, I'm not sure why. I haven't seen it so much everywhere, but they're going a bit quicker than other places around me where I live. I want to talk to you today about a subject that concerns most people who have been either diagnosed with some type of mental health condition, starting with anxiety and depression to other diagnoses. And that's the feeling of being isolated. And I'm going to emphasize the word feeling, but we are going to talk about isolation. Isolation is related to the stigma, which we've talked about before in this broadcast, and we will certainly talk about it again. But emphasizing the word feeling first, you may actually feel isolated from friends, family, from other people because of your symptoms and because of your condition. So we're going to take out our sheet here, remind the new subscribers, or those of you who've not yet gone to the website, put in my name, Pastor Ray Barnett, go to the mental health tab. You'll see this 12 Principles of Renewed, and you can download that. This is our syllabus. And today I want to accent principle number 11. Remember, these are principles that I came up with over the years when I taught this class at the church. Now I'm teaching it online to you. Number 11 on our sheet says this: I must be willing to be patient with God, myself, my family, and my friends. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 13 says this: there hath no temptation taken you but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that ye are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that ye may be able to bear it. That's 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 13. Make sure you download the sheet. And remember, the only textbook that we have on this broadcast is the Bible. Now, it is very common for those of you with mental health diagnoses, as well as the symptoms that accompany such diagnosis, to feel isolated. You can feel, I remember I'm emphasizing the word feel, because it doesn't mean you are isolated. Yet in some cases, there are some, and maybe many of you, who actually are isolated for various reasons. But let me go here so I don't forget it. The one thing, and I'm seeing this advertised on television now, I know the NFL is doing it, maybe some others as well, to overcome the stigma of what is loosely called, at least loosely in my mind, called mental illness. And when I saw the commercial, the one commercial that I saw, it was, various people, many of them were NFL players, talking about, it's okay to feel this way and reach out and don't be ashamed to, ask for help and so on. I think that's very, very good, especially when the world we live in, which is providing us with more occasions to feel anxious and depressed and down and discouraged. I may mention, by the way, which I haven't in a while, this is one channel we have on YouTube. The other channel are my sermons. And just put in, again, my name, Pastor Ray Barnett, the Time for Truth Ministries, right here on YouTube. And I would encourage you to listen to yesterday's message, which would be September the 24th, 2023, where I talked about stages that people go through, everybody goes through, if they're going to actually have deliverance. And the name of the message. I'd like you to watch it. It's an hour long. I preach for an hour. Distress, discouragement, and deliverance. I think that on this channel, you'll get something out of that message. And you can also obviously subscribe to that channel as well. It's my sermons on the Sunday mornings at the church. But I want to talk about the stigma. So we have people out there now they're doing a very good service for you, for all of us, I guess, to begin to erase the stigma of mental health issues. We'll talk about this on another occasion. I have talked about it before. I'm not quite sure how it's all developed over centuries, but in this 21st century, it really shouldn't be. For example, many of you who are on medications for anxiety and depression and so forth, so on, won't mention it. I have to frequently ask people that I'm counseling, what medications are you on? Well, sometimes they're not on any. Most are, so they'll give me the names and we'll talk about that a little bit. And I always tell them just not to be too, I'm telling you as well, don't be overly concerned about the medication part of it. When Jesus heals you, your doctor will be able to confirm that, hey, you know what, medication is either going to be reduced or not necessary. And I've given you examples and testimonies of people I've worked with that has happened to them. Especially the one woman, Debbie, who 33 years of schizophrenia, was taking off all of her medications that she was on for 33 years. In any case, it's the stigma. If you were to be asked, do you have diabetes? Yeah, well, I'm type 2 diabetes. Are you on metformin or one of the other medications? Not a problem talking about it, yeah. Heart medications, yeah, I'm on metoprolol and I'm on losartan and whatever else people are on. And heart disease and diabetes and, of course, cancers. And people aren't ashamed or afraid to talk about their medications. But when it comes to a mental health diagnosis, it's almost as if there is a shame attached to it, which in itself is a shame, that you have to live with that and others have to live with that. It should not be. Now, I'm not suggesting that you go out every day and tell people, hey, guess what, I got a mental health diagnosis. Most people don't go out and start a conversation or even include it in those instances, where they have diabetes and heart disease and whatever, unless it comes up. And you talk about it. But when it comes to mental health diagnosis and symptoms of the nervous system and of the brain, people are ashamed to admit it because it somehow implies a weakness, which is really both untrue and unfair. Not that you aren't weak, at times you are, but I mean, people undergoing chemotherapy are certainly weakened and sickened, and heart disease and heart surgeries and on and on and on. Diabetes, symptoms of diabetes. How this has developed into the 21st century, I don't know. The stigma, which again, we'll talk about it further. But for today, I want to talk about the feeling of isolation. Have you ever been in a room filled with people? It could be your own family and some of your closest friends. It could just be other people. Yet you feel all alone. Because in your mind, you're experiencing some symptoms, you're experiencing the thoughts that go with those symptoms, the fright, the feelings of danger, which I talk about here on the broadcast. And you have all these people around you, yet you feel all alone. The first thing that I want to let you know, which should be, at least from the standpoint of the intellect, it should be obvious that you're not alone. Tens of millions of people in this country alone are on medications for mental health, nervous symptoms, and of course around the world. You're not alone. And you got to have that clearly in your mind, because particularly with mental health issues, when you suffer from them, you actually feel, and I'm emphasizing that word, you feel like you're alone. Intellectually, you know that you're not, or at least you should know that you're not, but you feel that way. And that then leads to a feeling of isolation. I've known people literally locked up in their house, some for years, didn't leave their house. I've known of cases where people literally go into a room and shut off the lights and just won't come out. They're depressed and are anxious. And that's what makes them feel safe. Here's a little bit of trivia for you. When Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys was diagnosed early on, as a young man, he was only 20 years old, was diagnosed with schizophrenia. The song, if you're familiar with the song In My Room, well, that's what he was writing about. That's the place where he felt safe. That's the place where he felt comfortable. It's a beautiful song. Excuse me, many people don't know the background of the song. Brian Wilson wrote that song because of his own struggles, which has been a lifelong struggle with schizophrenia and its symptoms. But going back to the feeling of isolation, you have to know that you are not alone. It feels that way. But that's why this broadcast here, I hope will help in this area as well as other areas that I'll talk about and teach you. Help you to know that you're not alone. To help you to know that there's millions of people that have identical diagnosis or very similar or identical symptoms that you have. So you want to overcome the feeling of isolation. This broadcast, once again, should help you. I hope that it does. To overcome that part of it, don't isolate yourself. When you're depressed, for example, especially if it's a pretty severe depression, you don't want to be around people. You don't care how you're dressed. You don't care to do things. You lack motivation. Your muscles feel heavy. I've been there. I remember, over 30 years ago now, going through a period of depression where I actually felt like there was a piano on my back. I'd go out for a run and felt like I could barely walk. But the important thing in this teaching today is that it is a feeling attached to a thought. But I want you to know that you are not alone. Now, on a broadcast like this, where we're loosely, if at all, connected, many people watch and they don't make comments, so I don't even know who you are. It's important that you understand that you're not alone. Therefore, that should help you to overcome a feeling of isolation, when indeed, unless it's an extraordinary circumstance, kind of a minority, where you actually are isolated for whatever reason. But if that is you today, there's other ways to overcome that. And one of them is not to be ashamed of the fact that you have issues that are largely not your fault. So you don't want to get into that whole guilt thing and shame thing, which has been with us for far, far too long. You can overcome the feeling of isolation by being honest with yourself in acknowledging that you have these symptoms, even if they're, quote, spiritual. Remember, I'm a pastor. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm a pastor who has had extensive experience in this area, though I don't possess any degrees in this subject. I do possess a few degrees, but not specifically in mental health, other than to say this: the first dissertation that I wrote for my first PhD was, the title of it was, and the theme of it was, mental health and the Bible, and how God answers these questions in the Bible. That's what I'm trying to do for you here. So, to overcome the feeling, just as an introduction to this subject, to overcome the feeling of isolation, you've got to know that you are one of millions of people that have this condition. Number two, that should help you to process your thoughts differently and realize that even though you feel alone, even though you feel isolated because of this shameful guilt that's put onto people with regard to mental health issues, you're not alone. And I'm hoping that this broadcast will help to assuage or to mitigate those feelings of isolation. Whatever you do, it's good to have someone that you can honestly trust, that you can share with. Not everybody's going to understand it, but if you find somebody who has similar condition, they will understand. It's good if you have someone you can trust and share your feelings with about what you're going through and your depression and anxiety and your panic attacks, and if it is your case, voices, and God forbid, feelings of suicide. Suicide, remember, suicide is never the answer, ever. It's never the answer. It's one thing, I've been in ministry 46 years, and it's the one thing I've never really gotten used to when I have to do a funeral for someone who's committed suicide. I've never been able to reconcile myself to that. It's just put it out of your mind. And put the feeling of isolation out of your mind as well. You are not alone. And I hope that being with me and staying with me will help you stay connected, and that I'll be able to teach you the things that I've learned and I've taught others, and they work. I mean, they really work. People have been, many people that I've worked with have been totally freed up of their symptoms. That's the truth. All right. That's just a short introduction to this subject of the feeling of isolation. What will help you is to know you're not alone. And if you can find someone that you can talk and share with, a friend, a family member, whoever, that's going to be very, very helpful in you overcoming a feeling of isolation. I must say it, and I'm not grandstanding this broadcast here, which has really very few subscribers, which is fine, as you know, fine with me. I hope that, staying here will also, again, mitigate some of those feelings of isolation. You are not alone. So let me pray for you today. Father, I pray for my friends and these feelings of isolation. I ask you, God, to help them to understand they are not alone. They are one of millions and millions of people who suffer from these symptoms and diagnoses. And I ask you, God, to give them the victory as you've given to so many that I've worked with and others that I've known, that have been able to be freed of them and to overcome them. And I ask that today in Jesus' mighty name. All right, if you're new to the broadcast, don't forget to subscribe. There'll be many, many teachings to come. I already have up over here over 450 videos. And if you're new, just subscribe, hit the notification button, and the thumbs up won't hurt anybody either, including you. So, God willing, I think the rest of this week is a very small chance of rain, so I should be able to get outdoors with you and bring these broadcasts to you. Always remember that no matter what is going on in your life, let the peace of Christ rule in it. God willing, I'll see you again here tomorrow on The Oasis.